What's the good word, y'all? DKB here. Let's talk about the New York Jets. Free agency. We have our own players that we have to deal with. There's a lot of things that are going to impact this. We're talking about changes on the offensive coaching staff, potentially philosophy, scheme. Defensively, we don't want to do anything to take away from sustaining the level we're currently at. And we're hoping we can make some upgrades at a few key areas to even improve what was already a top five ranked unit. But we don't want to see a significant fall off because that's most likely going to be our calling card while our offense tries to get established and acclimated. So let's dive into it. 27 players, half of a 53-man active roster that we have to sift through and figure out who's going to be core contributors for us. So let's run through the 27, and then I'm going to give you guys 6 of my priority free agents that we're going to have to try to figure out a way to retain. Technically 5. I threw a little bit of a sneak in there, but let's get to it. So at quarterback, we have Joe Flacco, Mike White. At running back, we have Ty Johnson, James Robinson, and the fullback, Nick Bawden. At wide receiver, Jeff Smith. On the offensive line for our tackles, we have George Fant, Mike Rimmer, Cedric Ogilvie, Greg Sinnat. At guard, Dan Feeney, Nate Herbig, and Laurent Duvernay-Tardif, and Drew Samia. And then at center, Connor McGovern. Then on the defensive side for us, our ends, we have Vinny Curry and Bryce Huff. At defensive tackle, we have Nathan Shepard, Sheldon Rankin, Solomon Thomas. At linebacker, Quincy Williams, Quan Alexander, Hamza Nasruddin. Cornerback, Zane Lewis. At safety, LaMarcus Joyner and Will Parks. And then for special teams, Greg Zierlein. So quite a few names. My first priority free agent is going to be on the offensive side, and the guy for me is going to be running back James Robinson. This is fully built around the value of his contract and some of the comments that Robert Saleh mentioned about him definitely being included in the future plans, which was mentioned before the Mike LaFleur firing and, John Benton leaving, Miles Austin being ghosted, all of those different kind of things. But still, if we want to rely on between Ty Johnson and James Robinson history, it doesn't get better than being able to secure a former 1,000-yard rusher for under $3 to $4 million as part of your rotation. And I would still consider him Breece Hall insurance when you want to say running back by committee till Breece Hall really feels like he's actually got his footing under him. One of the other things as well would just be in general with the new staff, potentially new scheme. You hope that they would unlock the potential that maybe Mike LaFleur just wasn't able to figure out with him. Probably more so philosophical difference than anything with the nature of how they wanted him to run versus what he showed in conjunction with what he produced on the field as well. But if I'm going to roll the dice, I'm going to do it with a guy that's proven to be productive in this league. For my next guy, we're going to go to the offensive line, and I'm going to consider Nate Herbig a guy that's going to be a key depth piece for me. If he ends up ultimately finding his way into a starting role, then that's just going to be a surplus. But this is 100% about raising the floor of the offensive line play. And with Nate Herbig, we effectively know what we have: a road grader, supreme run blocker in certain aspects, over somebody that's going to be able to protect the quarterback. And you need that little bit of nastiness to your offensive line, especially when you get into the December months. Things are cold. You're trying to avoid kicking and having to necessarily throw as much as possible and just be able to go out there and, mano a mano, a man up. So I think Nate Herbig would be a strong candidate, especially considering if you want to, try to make comparisons with him and Dan Feeney. I would consider him the better guard. He's obviously the younger player, can still grow into, a stronger role for himself. And he was one of our best run blockers throughout the course of the season. I mean, things started to trail off as much as the offensive line started to fall apart for everybody. But we talked about it before. Connor McGovern was clearly head and shoulders our best consistent run blocker throughout the season. Elijah Vera Tucker's essentially excluded from this just due to the early injury. But most consistent, impactful run blocker. And then next up was Nate Herbig, and that matched what we seen on film. The only thing that really would concern me is that Nate Herbig has kind of had a propensity to rack up penalties. We're talking 6 for him 2 seasons ago. He had 4 this year. One of them ended up being declined, and two of them were holding calls. But those are things that I feel like he can probably be groomed and grow out of, and potentially this new scheme would play to his attributes more effectively than what we've seen out of this West Coast scheme. We'll have to wait and see for that, but ultimately having him as one of our main backup guards, I think would suit us very, very well. The only issue would be there's not a lot of versatility for him, but depending on who we bring in at offensive line, maybe that's a focus in kind of trying to dual skill a lot of these guys so that we can kind of maximize these opportunities. Now, when we flip to the defensive side, I'm going with defensive end Bryce Huff. Probably our most enigmatic player when you consider what he's shown on film in the small sample sizes. He's been able to go out there and prove certain things, and what he's proven is that he's an elite pass rusher, and when we want to talk about it situationally anyways, which is how he's been implemented. The guy's first step is lightning quick. It's almost silly. We got a lot of anime guys on the field, but when you talk about him being able to automatically just blow by people, and the only hope you have is to really force a hold or to hope that your quarterback has been able to kind of evade his rush and then get himself into a better situation. 9 times out of 10, Bryce Huff is going to force 3 scenarios. He's going to force the quarterback into a bad throw. He's going to get after and sack the quarterback, or he's going to force a holding call. And we've seen that on display in a very, very small sample size this season. I mean, one of the things that were interesting to me was that in a down year last year, he was able to see the field 51% of the time. And that's with injuries involved, a very lackluster defense as a whole, from the defensive line to linebackers to cornerback, safety, etc. Everybody was kind of down and out while we were installing this defense and looking to see who's going to be core pieces for the future and who kind of we're seeing develop in real time week after week. This year, a much different situation. We strengthened the cornerback room so that our pass rushers actually had time to get to the quarterback, and then defensively on the line, we're talking about so many pieces that balled out. Quentin Williams, Sheldon Rankins was having a career year. We had brought over Jacob Martin, who looked like he was a strong situational pass rusher. We're talking Jermaine Johnson and Michael Clemens, who's shown well that they can acclimate decent enough in their rookie year. There's a litany of players for him to try to fight playing time for. That all resulted in him only playing 20% of the snaps this season. But with that limited sample size, we're talking, 14 to 17 snaps a game effectively. He ended up racking up 6 tackles, 3.5 sacks, a forced fumble, and a pass deflection. And his 3.5 sacks almost matched the 4 sacks that he's had over the previous 2 seasons. And he did this on 20% of the snaps. So in my mind, the way this works out, let's say 3 to 5 of those 14 to 17 are run opportunities. He's not a strong run defender, which is one of the main things Robert Saleh says is not allowing him to see the field more. Fine. Regardless, 3 to 5 of those are run opportunities, leaving him about 10 true pass rushing opportunities, and he was absolutely maximizing those. So when we want to talk risk, having a guy like Carl Lawson that could potentially make $15 million, or investing that $15 million into Bryce Huff and securing him for 3 or 4 years, I think makes the most sense to me. He's healthier, he's younger, he's shown that he has elite traits that we haven't necessarily seen from a Carl Lawson. And if we want to give him starter level snaps and an opportunity, I think he's a guy that can surprise us, much like we've seen with the John Franklin Myers, and do it consistently if he's able to stay healthy. When we want to look at the linebacker unit, this is where the cheat kind of came in. I have Quan and I have Quincy as 2 priority free agents for us, and if we sign both of them, I wouldn't be disappointed. So let's start off with Quincy. His situation is the most interesting. Quentin, his brother, also on the team. They could kind of be a package deal, buy one, get one, however you want to consider it. I think that may play a bit of a factor. We're talking about some NFL professionals, but it's not often that you get 2 brothers that can play on the same team and they're both starters, right? Normally, if you see it, you have somebody that's, essentially acting like a walk-on to the team, a UDFA kind of situation, all that stuff. But Quincy Williams was able to really ball out this season. He was rough around the edges, but I think you're definitely starting to see him refine his game. 106 tackles, 3 sacks, a pass deflection. 14 of his tackles were run stuffs, or 14 of his 106 were run stuffs, and he played 79% of the snaps on defense. So there was definitely a lot of boneheaded mistakes that were getting made, right? We had the unnecessary roughness penalties in the preseason. We had the roughing the passer call that happened earlier in the season, which really ended up costing us against the Patriots. That one's a little bit more debatable. But aside from all of that, I think, especially after the injury, when he came back, you've seen things starting to click. He was attacking the line of scrimmage with purpose, like he was understanding what was going on with the offense. He was making his usual big hits throughout the game that was able to kind of spark the defense when we needed it. And it seemed like he generally played in sync with the rest of his linebacker unit, which is about as well as you can ask. And he still fits the quintessential mold that Robert Saleh loves in his linebackers, as those smaller, speedier, but hard-hitting guys. So I think we're seeing some of the turnover-worthy plays come up. I think we're seeing a level of consistency start to come out of him that makes me confident that extending a contract to him would make a lot of sense here, especially as we try to move into a younger core, and we've seen him proven to be a bit more productive. So I'm seeing less boneheaded mistakes. I'm seeing more opportunities for him to make a positive impact on this team and leave his blueprint in the linebacker unit. And as for Kwan Alexander, this is a little bit related to the potential that we can move on from CJ Mosley and still have an established leader on the team that can lead by example, both verbally and what's occurring on the field, right? Production-wise, he's in only 49% of the snaps, 69 tackles, a half of a sack, a forced fumble, a pass deflection. 9 of those tackles were run stuffs, which was his second highest total since the sophomore 2016 season, in which we've seen him play something like 96% of the snaps. So we're seeing him play well and above what you would expect. He came in late in the season, which is why he's hovering closer to 50%. But again, this could be a younger version of CJ Mosley for us. Essentially, he's younger, quicker, more athletic. He understands defenses just as well as CJ for the most part. And we've seen the big plays. We've seen him come in and land, bone-jarring hits on people. He's been able to cause some turnover plays. And again, he's going to lead by example out there. I love some of the leadership qualities that we've heard about, him having personal handshakes with everybody offensively and defensively. And then there was a minor thing I think CJ Mosley mentioned in one of his press conferences. If you ask him how his day is, he's going to respond with something about it being legendary, which is something I really love. Positive energy 24/7. And my final priority free agent, I think this is honestly going to be one of the most underrated but most pivotal pieces for us to try to secure. And it's going to be Greg Zuerlein, Greg the Leg, Legatron, whatever you want to go with them as. It's been so long since we've been able to have a consistent kicker that we know can get the job done on this offense. And we made mistakes letting Jason Myers go. We made mistakes letting Nick Folk go. And we've seen that we've been paying for it. And I think this season makes it even more so critical when you think about what we asked Greg Zuerlein to do with a lot of the positions we put him in, having to secure comeback wins, having to just stall off an opponent that's making a comeback, and all of this where he's having to kick 50-plus yards pretty consistently, right? So, he was able to convert 82.4% of his field goals on the season, which is not too shabby. He ended up being tied for third in attempts. When you take a look at the actual breakdown, he was only one of 5 kickers to attempt and make a 60-plus yarder. And he was only one of 7 kickers to attempt at least 10 field goals within the 50 to 59-yard range. He was able to make 5 of those 10. But again, everything in context has to be considered. We're talking about the New York Jets, a putrid offense that couldn't consistently move chains, that couldn't consistently make plays in the red zone, that asked him pretty consistently in crunch time scenarios to have to kick a 56, a 58 yarder, the one occasion where he had to make a 60 yarder in order to either keep us in games or try to hold on to a small opportunity to secure a victory. And he got it done more often than not, in my opinion. He's not a guy that I want to see leave. And I don't think it's going to be crazy to say, let's just give him $10 million over, the 3 years that he's probably going to get in order to make sure that we have the kicking unit locked down. We already probably need to replace Braden Mann. And I don't want to have to worry about, another kicking competition and all of these other things. I think he's done more than enough to essentially salvage his opportunity with us. And if there's a fall off, there's not going to be a huge amount of value that we placed into that position. But I don't know. What do I know? All I'm saying is I think in the conditions that we're going to ask, and especially, again, moving into next season, we're talking about an offense, unless they click right away, we're going to have to rely on his legs again to try to make sure we're consistently putting up points on the board. But let me know what your guys' thoughts are. 27 free agents. Who do you guys consider the primary guys that we need to bring back? Obviously, we're going to need more than 6, but these are the guys that make the most sense about being able to maintain or upgrade the level of play that we'll have for the 2023 season. So again, let me know what your guys' thoughts are, and I'll catch you again. Peace.